Alu, greetings. My name is Ajamu, and I'm an organizer for the All African People's Revolutionary Party in California. And I'm making this video to talk to my brothers, African men. And I want to talk about three things that we have to do today, that we have no choice but to do if we are going to not only survive as a people, but flourish and advance as a people. It's critical that we as African men play our role. Now, first, I'll say I'm calling us African because that's what we are. Not just because that's where we come from, that we're of African descent, but because Africa is where we're going. Whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, whether we understand it or not, as a people, our salvation is tied to the future of Africa. And it's not about whether you think the continent should be called Africa, Leo Africanus. If you want to call it party people land, then we're party people land people. We have to be tied to our motherland. There are no people on earth who have gained liberation who are disconnected from their homeland family. So we are African people. So that's why I'm using the term African to describe us. So as it relates to African men, as I said, I'm going to talk about three things we absolutely have to do if we're going to be positive contributors to our people's forward progress. Number one, we have to acknowledge and reject this dominant patriarchal society that exists in the world today. And by patriarchal, I mean a society that's male dominated and is designed to ensure the dominance of men through the oppression of women. And that's what you have in this Western capitalist society today, dominated society today. You have patriarchal societies where male dominance is the thing. And if you study African history, then you know that historically in Africa, we had dominantly matriarchal societies where women were in position of power. But if you study those societies, I'm talking about societies like ancient Angola, for example, where they had queens who had ultimate power, like Queen Nzinga. If you study those societies, you'll see that in those societies, men were not subjugated. Men were not denied opportunities to advance and contribute to society. In fact, men were permitted to reach their full potential. So in that sense, matriarchy or matriarchal societies is completely different from patriarchal societies, which are dominant today, which are based on the subjugation and oppression of women. So as men, as African men, we have to decide today that we're going to reject patriarchy. And what that means is that we're going to reject this system that places us in a position of power to dominate, exploit, and oppress African women, and a system that oppresses women as a whole worldwide. So we as African men have to do that. We have to decide today that we are going to be committed to not only destroying white supremacy, but also equally contributing our energies to destroying the patriarchal anti-woman society that we live in today. That's number one. The second thing we have to do is we as African men, it's critical that we change our behavior towards women. We have to decide that we're going to do that today. As a part of our transformation away from this patriarchal society, we have to begin to see women as able to accomplish whatever we can accomplish. And we can't see our work to advance as a people as based on limiting women without creating conditions, without having women create conditions where they can reach their full potential. We have to be willing to do that. And that also includes us being able to acknowledge that there are plenty of people in our African community who are LGBTQ. These are people who have as much right to our community and the things that we can benefit collectively from our advanced struggle. And we as men have to be vocal in acknowledging that these folks are a part of our community and we accept them and we respect them. So we have to be willing to do that. And of course, that means, it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Of course, that means that we have to abolish any type of abuse towards women today, any type of physical, verbal, psychological abuse towards women is absolutely unacceptable. And we should establish a no tolerance position on that in our communities, because by doing that, we are engaging in the most evident and most consistent support for patriarchy. The values that patriarchy is built on are these values of physically dominating women, or ensuring that women are physically, psychologically, spiritually kept down. So we have to decide today that our African women are not our enemies. They are not the people who we need to take out our frustrations at this white supremacist capitalist society on, that we need to begin to see them as our partners in this struggle for justice in this world today. And we as men have to take on that mentality. We have to do that. The third thing that we have to do today is make a conscious decision that we are going to play our role in organizing and working with our people to organize so that we can begin to eliminate the oppressive conditions that our people face all over the world. We have to play our role in doing that. And in doing so, we have to reject these bourgeois fantasy ideologies and philosophies that we can somehow on an individual basis integrate into the capitalist system and achieve our justice and liberation that way on an individual basis. Clearly, that philosophy is bankrupt and will never work for us as a people. Our culture, our African culture, is a collective culture. It's a humanistic culture. There's nothing in our culture and our history that advocates raising the individual above the collective so that the individual could advance while the collective, the masses of people, suffer. That's a foreign ideology to our people. And so understanding who we are as African people means that we have to take the responsibility and the reins of participating in our struggle for liberation against this system and working with our women and our LGBTQ members of our community and everybody in our community who wants to fight against the enemies of justice. We have to decide to agree to work with them as one to do that. And in some of those instances, it's women or it's non-gendered Africans who will take the lead in those struggles. And we as men have to be willing to accept that when those people clearly have the qualifications to provide leadership, we have to subvert our egos and permit ourselves to participate in that struggle in supporting their leadership. That's the sign of true power for men. That's the sign of true maturity and power. Power is not physically dominating someone because you don't have the intellectual capacity to deal with them on that level. Power is being able to acknowledge that sometimes it's not about you. Your role is to support the process that's designed to get us free, even if that means that you're not the person determining what that process is. That's a mature man. That's a strong man. That's a powerful man. And that's what our people need. That's what our children need. That's what our future needs. So I'm calling out all African men everywhere on earth to think about these three things: acknowledging and rejecting patriarchy, making a conscious decision to change our behavior to support women and to work to ensure that women are able to reach their full potential in society. And along with that, supporting the LGBTQ members of our African family the exact same way. And third, making a commitment to engage in the struggle for our people's liberation and participating in that. And that means being in organizations working for our people's forward progress, not just running your mouth about what our people need. There are too many YouTube superstar African leaders on here with no organization. And there is no way we're going to advance as a people with no organization. If you people who are on here bumping your gums constantly about our people's struggle, if you have the way to liberate our people by yourselves, I don't know what the hell you're waiting on to do it. I wish you would go ahead and liberate us if you think you have the ability to do that. But the reason why that has not happened is because it cannot happen that way. It's unscientific, it's ahistorical, and it has no basis in material reality. The truth is there are no shortcuts. There's no way around it. We have to learn to respect each other. We have to learn to work together. And it's only when we learn to do that that we're going to be able to make forward progress as a people collectively, as is the way of our African culture. So those three things I'm calling on every African man everywhere on earth to do. Because until we as men commit and engage those three things, we as a people will never be able to move forward. And it'll be on us. History will judge us as being too selfish, too immature, and too egotistical to rise above pettiness so that we could do what we needed to do to liberate our people. Are you brothers ready to do that? Are you willing to do that? I'm willing. And I'm willing to work with anybody else who's willing. So the time is now for us to decide that we're going to take decisive action to change our suffering conditions. We'll see which African men out here will heed this call. Forward ever, backwards never.